The night was broken by a cry that should not have existed there, sharp and piercing in the sterile quiet of the hospital ward. Emma clutched the cold metal bench, her chest tightening as the nurse whispered a name she had buried years ago. "James Carter," the nurse said softly, placing a newborn in her trembling arms. Emma's heart pounded as though someone had struck her ribs with iron. She had sworn to leave, to cut every tie and never look back. Yet here was the impossible. A tiny life, fragile and undeniable, bearing the mark of a past she thought was erased. Across town, James entered the courtroom with steady steps, unaware his life would rupture in moments. His lawyer's voice faltered as the judge declared that a child carried his blood. James staggered, gripping the table as though it were the only thing tethering him to earth. Emma whispered, "No, this cannot be mine." The world collapsed into disbelief, denial, and the suffocating weight of a truth neither of them could escape. Emma stared at the child in her arms, her body frozen as if her soul refused to move. The nurse's words burned in her ears, cutting deeper than any wound she had known. Emma whispered, "No, this isn't real," though the child's warmth betrayed her denial. Her chest heaved with shallow breaths, and guilt surged through her veins like fire. She had left to escape pain, not inherit it. Somewhere else, James' lawyer leaned close, whispering frantic reassurances. James snapped. How could they know? His heart pounded, but he masked it with pride, refusing to let weakness show. The gavel struck, and the courtroom fell silent. Across miles, Emma rocked the child unknowingly, tears sliding down her face. The silence between both worlds grew heavier, a bond neither one wanted but neither could break. James tried to steady himself, but the truth clawed at him. The judge's words replayed in his mind like a relentless drum beat. He had worked years to bury his mistakes, to craft a life untouched by ghosts. Yet here was proof he could not ignore, living, breathing. James muttered, "They cannot tie me to this." His lawyer pressed, "The blood test leaves no doubt." James' face tightened as whispers spread through the courtroom, each voice a dagger. His eyes searched the room for escape, but the walls themselves seemed to close in. Across town, Emma pressed her forehead to the newborn's soft hair, whispering, "I cannot do this again." Her voice cracked like glass, her tears soaking the blanket. The world had forced their lives back together, and the weight of that truth began to crush them both. Emma's mind spiraled back to the promises she had made herself. She had sworn to cut all ties, to escape the shadows of betrayal. But the baby's soft breath against her chest dissolved those vows in seconds. She whispered, "Why now? Why me?" Her body trembled as she rocked slowly, as though rhythm alone might keep her sane. In the courtroom, James clenched his fists, fury flashing in his eyes. "This is a mistake," he growled under his breath, his pride refusing to bow. But deep within, he felt a crack widening. The gavel echoed once more, sealing his fate. The silence was unbearable. In two different worlds, they both realized the truth had already bound them tighter than any choice could undo. James collapsed into his chair, his strength finally breaking. His voice was low but sharp. "I never asked for this." His lawyer leaned in, whispering, "It doesn't matter. The world already knows." James' chest burned with humiliation, his reputation hanging by a thread. He slammed his hand on the table, but even the sound felt hollow. At the hospital, Emma kissed the child's forehead, her tears staining its soft skin. She whispered, "I promised I would leave, but you've trapped me here." The baby stirred, tiny fingers brushing against her cheek as if in answer. Emma's sob broke the silence. Both she and James, in different corners of the world, stood at the same crossroads. A child neither had asked for now demanded everything. Emma sat alone in the dim hospital room, the newborn curled against her chest. Her arms felt heavy, not from the child's weight, but from the storm of memories clawing through her. She whispered, "I was supposed to escape this life." The sterile scent of antiseptic made her stomach twist, reminding her of nights filled with loss and betrayal. Her mind replayed James' face, the only man she had ever trusted before he shattered her world. I cannot raise this child, she thought, but her voice trembled with doubt. The baby stirred, pressing closer to her heartbeat, as though claiming her against her will. She closed her eyes, and the image of her own mother abandoning her years ago burned bright, a scar she had never healed. Emma's tears fell silently, each drop mixing with the warmth of the infant she had sworn she would never hold. James sat in his car outside the courthouse, his tie loosened, his face pale under the glow of the dashboard. He muttered, "This cannot be mine. They must be wrong." Yet the words rang hollow. His reflection stared back from the rearview mirror, the same tired eyes that had once looked at Emma with love. He pounded the steering wheel, fury choking his throat. His lawyer's words haunted him, "There is no denying blood." James buried his face in his hands, replaying the night that had led to this, the choices, the lies, the cowardice. He whispered, "I am not ready for this," yet the silence reminded him that time had already betrayed him. Outside, the world moved on as though nothing had changed, while James' carefully built life began to fracture, piece by piece. Emma pressed her cheek against the newborn's head, the warmth seeping into her hollow heart. She whispered, "I was never meant to be a mother." Yet a strange ache spread through her, one that felt like longing. The baby's tiny fingers brushed her chin, a simple touch that broke her defenses. She remembered her mother's absence, the endless nights of loneliness, and the vow she made never to repeat that cycle. But here she was, with a fragile life tethering her to a past she tried to forget. "You should hate me," she said softly. "But you don't." Her tears slid freely, the baby's breath calm against her skin. In that moment, Emma realized that the child was not just a burden, but a mirror of everything she had lost, and everything she could still become. James sat on the edge of his bed that night, the suit jacket tossed aside, the shadows of the room closing in around him. His hand dragged down his face, the weight of guilt pressing like stone. He whispered, "If this child is mine, then so is my shame." The memory of Emma's tears haunted him, the way she once begged him to stay. He had walked away then, proud and cold. Now the world demanded, he returned to what he had abandoned. "I cannot undo what I've done," he muttered, staring at the cracks in the ceiling as if they were tally marks of his sins. Yet beneath the bitterness, a spark of fear flickered, fear not of the child, but of himself, and what he might lose if he refused to face the truth. Emma stood near the hospital window, the city lights glowing faintly through the glass. The baby stirred softly in her arms, and she whispered, "You are not supposed to exist in my world." Yet her grip tightened instinctively, pulling the child closer. She thought of James, of how his pride had destroyed them both. She vowed never to let him control her again, but the child's presence complicated everything. Emma pressed her forehead to the glass, cold against her burning skin. "I am terrified of loving you," she admitted, her voice breaking. But as the infant's tiny breath warmed her chest, she realized that fear itself was proof of something deeper stirring. She could not yet name it, but it was there, demanding to be felt. Emma's return to her small apartment felt like stepping into a cage she had tried so hard to abandon. The baby's cries echoed off the peeling walls, every sound pulling her deeper into panic. She whispered, "I cannot do this alone," but there was no one left to hear. Her phone buzzed with messages, whispers of neighbors, already spreading rumors. Emma pressed the child to her chest, her pulse racing. "They will judge me, they always do," she thought, flashes of scornful faces from her past filling her mind. Across town, James faced his own storm. His father's cold voice rang over the phone. "This shame is yours alone. Do not bring it upon us." James clenched his jaw, fury rising. He shouted, "I did not ask for this." But even his defiance sounded hollow. Both Emma and James realized the world was already preparing to turn against them. James stood in his parents' study, the oak shelves lined with leather-bound books looming over him. His father, Richard, silver-haired and stern, glared at him with eyes like steel. Richard's voice cut like a knife. "You will deny this child. Do you hear me?" James' chest tightened as he muttered, The blood test is undeniable. His father slammed his fist on the desk. Then bury it. This family does not live with shame. James' hands curled into fists, the weight of expectation crushing him. He wanted to fight, but years of obedience shackled him. His father's judgment echoed louder than his own heart, drowning him in guilt. James turned away, his reflection in the glass door showing a man caught between pride and the chains of blood. Emma's neighbor, Mrs. Collins, stood at her doorway as Emma carried the baby upstairs. Her narrowed eyes and sharp tone struck like a lash. "So it's true," she sneered, arms folded across her chest. Emma's shoulders hunched, clutching the child tighter. "It's none of your concern," she whispered, her voice breaking. Mrs. Collins smirked. "It's everyone's concern when shame lives next door." Emma's chest ached as old wounds reopened, the whispers of gossip she had tried to escape now louder than ever. She shut her door quickly, leaning against it, trembling. The baby stirred and Emma whispered, "I will not let them take you from me." Yet her own words felt fragile, like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. James walked through the office the next day, whispers trailing behind him like smoke. Colleagues avoided his gaze, yet their murmurs were loud enough to cut. His business partner, Mark, cornered him by the glass wall. "James, investors are asking questions," Mark said sharply. James growled, "It's none of their business." Mark shook his head. "When your bloodline is in question, it becomes everyone's business." The words stung deeper than James wanted to admit. He pressed his forehead against the glass, watching the city skyline blur. His empire was built on reputation, and now it crumbled faster than he could contain. In that moment, James realized the child was no longer just a personal truth. It was public ammunition. Emma sat on the floor of her apartment, knees drawn up as the baby lay asleep in a basket beside her. The silence was heavy, broken only by the infant's faint breaths. Emma whispered, "Everyone will hate us, just like they hated me." Her chest burned with fear as she imagined the future: courts, whispers, rejection. Yet as she watched the baby's tiny chest rise and fall, something shifted. She touched the child's hand gently, whispering, "But I will not abandon you." The words surprised her, a vow rising from a place she had buried deep. Outside, voices carried from the hallway, more gossip, more judgment. Emma closed her eyes, shielding the child with her presence, her arms forming a fragile wall against the world. Emma sat in the hospital records room, her hands shaking as she flipped through papers, handed to her by a sympathetic nurse. The birth certificate made her stomach churn. James' name was written, but another name lingered in the shadows. She whispered, "No, this cannot be right." Her chest tightened, as though her ribs were closing in. She remembered a night long ago, the arguments, the secrets exchanged between James and his brother Daniel. The paper suggested what Emma feared most, that Daniel might be the true father. Her heart thundered with betrayal. She pressed the certificate to her chest, whispering, "You lied to me, all of you." The silence in the room grew heavier, and Emma realized her world was shifting, the truth cutting her deeper than any wound she had endured. James confronted his brother Daniel in the family estate's garden, the night air heavy with tension. Daniel stood with arms crossed, his eyes cold. James growled, "Tell me the truth, is this child mine?" Daniel smirked bitterly, replying, "You were never supposed to know." The words cut like shards of glass. James' breath caught in his throat as rage filled his chest. "You betrayed me," he whispered. Daniel's face twisted, not with guilt, but with defiance. "I protected the family. You were too weak." The brothers stood face to face, the distance between them filled with years of rivalry, resentment, and secrets now revealed. James' fists clenched, his body trembling, his life collapsing in the weight of betrayal. Emma sat with the child in her arms, the truth gnawing at her from within. She whispered, "Daniel, it was you all along." The baby's innocent face made the revelation unbearable. Her tears fell fast as she recalled Daniel's charm, the manipulation hidden beneath his smile. He had pretended to protect her, yet he had used her trust. Emma pressed her forehead against the baby's, whispering, "You are the proof of my deepest mistake." She wanted to run, to disappear, but the child anchored her to the betrayal she could not escape. The walls of her apartment seemed to close in, suffocating her with memories she wished to erase. James stood before his father once more, fury radiating from every word. "You knew," he accused, his voice cracking. Richard's cold eyes narrowed. "Daniel was always stronger. The family's future could not rest on you." James' chest heaved, rage battling despair. "You let him destroy everything," he shouted. Richard raised his chin, voice icy. "I saved this family's name." James staggered back, his world unraveling. His entire life had been a lie. His own father choosing deception over truth, loyalty over blood. For the first time, James realized he had been nothing more than a pawn in a game he never agreed to play. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Her hands shook as she opened it. A single line read, "That child is not James. It is Daniel's." The words blurred through her tears. She whispered, everything was a lie. The baby stirred, as though sensing her despair. Emma pressed her lips to the child's forehead, whispering, "I don't know if I can forgive myself." The city hummed outside her window, indifferent to her shattered world. She sank to the floor, clutching the child tightly, realizing her life would never again be built on truth, only the fragile fragments of betrayal. Emma stormed into the courtroom, the child in her arms, her face streaked with tears. James stood near the bench, his fists clenched, while Daniel sat smugly, arms folded. The judge's gavel struck, demanding order, but the air was already electric. Emma cried out, "Tell the truth. You all knew, and you let me suffer." Daniel's smirk vanished, and James shouted, "You betrayed me." The baby whimpered, the sound silencing the room. Emma's chest heaved as she whispered, "This child deserves more than lies." The judge's gaze hardened as though weighing lives on invisible scales. Every eye in the room turned toward Emma, her trembling frame holding the only innocence left in a storm of deceit. James turned on Daniel, his voice breaking through the whispers. "You destroyed everything." Daniel rose from his chair, jaw tight, eyes burning with defiance. "I saved the family," he snapped. The courtroom erupted, gasps echoing like thunder. James lunged forward, but Emma's desperate cry halted him. "Stop," she begged, her arms tightening around the child. Her voice cracked as she shouted, "This is not about either of you, it's about her." The baby's soft cry pierced the silence, and the men froze. For the first time, the weight of innocence cut sharper than their pride. The room felt suffocating, every breath held in a fragile pause before the storm returned. Emma's strength faltered as she sank to her knees before the bench, the child still in her arms. Her voice trembled. "I don't care who the father is. She deserves love, not your wars." Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded, "Do you not see? You've turned her into a weapon." James' eyes softened for the first time, his fury cracking under the weight of her words. Daniel's face shifted, guilt flickering across his hardened expression. The judge leaned forward, his tone sharp but heavy. "This child's fate is not for games of pride. This is about responsibility." Emma bowed her head, the baby's hand clutching her sleeve as though anchoring her to a truth she could no longer deny. The silence shattered as James roared, "I will not let her be abandoned." His voice carried pain and rage, but also something Emma had not heard before: resolve. Daniel scoffed, but his arrogance faltered. Emma looked up at James, her voice breaking. "You walked away once. Why should I trust you now?" James' eyes filled with unshed tears. "Because I cannot walk away again," he whispered. The words stunned even him, echoing louder than the gavel that struck once more. Emma clutched the baby tighter, her heart torn between fury and fragile hope. For the first time, she saw not the man who left her, but the man who might fight for their child. Emma rose slowly, exhaustion etched across her face. She whispered, "I don't care about your pride. I care about her." She held the baby high, as though offering proof of innocence none of them could deny. The room fell into stillness, every gaze fixed on the child. Daniel's defiance wavered, James' fury melted into sorrow, and Emma's voice cut through the silence. "This is the only truth that matters." The baby's soft coo broke the air, fragile yet powerful, reminding them all that their wars meant nothing compared to her life. Emma's tears streamed freely, her vow unshaken now. In that moment, she chose not for herself, nor for either man, but for the child who had forced every secret into the light. The courtroom emptied slowly, leaving Emma alone in the echo of silence. She sat on the wooden bench, the baby asleep against her chest. Her eyes stung, her body trembling, but for the first time her voice steadied. "You are mine," she whispered. James lingered at the door, torn between pride and regret. He spoke softly, "I will fight if you let me." Emma's head bowed, her tears falling into the baby's blanket. The weight of choice crushed her. Trusting him meant opening the wound again. Refusing meant raising the child in loneliness. The silence between them was sharp, filled with years of scars. She whispered, "Do not promise what you cannot keep." James' face broke, his mask slipping into sorrow. For once, neither fought. They simply stood in the fragile stillness of truth. That night, Emma returned to her small apartment. The baby slept in the basket beside her bed, its faint breaths like whispers of forgiveness. Emma sat on the floor, her back against the wall, staring at the cracked ceiling. She whispered, "I am not ready, but I will not walk away." Her chest ached as she remembered her mother's absence, the hollow space it left behind. Thought of repeating that cycle terrified her more than any judgment. She reached for the child's tiny hand, letting it curl around her finger. Her tears softened into a fragile smile, a rare glimpse of hope. For the first time, she whispered words she thought she'd never say. "Maybe you are the reason I stayed." James walked along the empty street, outside his family estate, his tie loosened, his steps heavy. His father's words still burned, but for once he ignored them. He whispered, "I cannot undo the past, but I can choose differently now." His reflection in the rain-streaked glass of a storefront stopped him. He saw not the polished man his family demanded, but a broken figure longing for redemption. He pressed his forehead against the glass, whispering, "I want to be more than my father's son." For the first time, his pride gave way to fear, the fear of losing the only chance to make things right. He turned back toward the city, determined but uncertain, walking into the shadows of a life he had tried to deny. Emma stood at her window, the city lights shimmering beyond the glass. The baby rested against her shoulder, its soft breath warming her skin. She whispered, "The world will judge me, but you will know me." Her voice trembled, but her grip tightened protectively. The memory of whispers from neighbors returned, but for the first time, she felt stronger than their scorn. She pressed her lips gently against the child's head, her tears falling silently. "You are not my mistake," she said. "You are my fight." The city hummed indifferently, but in her chest, resolve bloomed. The fear remained, but it no longer ruled her. For the first time, she chose to stand, not for herself, but for the fragile life that demanded her strength. The following morning, Emma walked into the park, the baby nestled in her arms beneath a blanket. The early sun broke through gray clouds, painting the grass in muted gold. James appeared on the path, his steps uncertain but determined. Emma's heart pounded, but she did not turn away. He whispered, "Let me try." Her eyes narrowed, voice sharp yet weary. "One chance, no more." James nodded, his chest heavy with the weight of his vow. They stood in fragile silence, two broken souls bound by a child, neither expected but both could no longer deny. The baby stirred softly, a reminder of innocence demanding more than pride or pain. For the first time, the possibility of something fragile but real seemed within reach. The park was quiet, the air heavy with morning dew. Emma sat on a wooden bench, the baby asleep against her chest. James stood nearby, hands buried in his pockets, his silence louder than words. Emma whispered, I never wanted this life, yet here it is. James lowered his head, admitting, neither did I, but running from it has destroyed everything. She glanced at him, her voice low but sharp. Do not make promises you cannot keep. The baby shifted, sighing softly, and Emma pressed her lips to its forehead. She felt torn between the safety of solitude and the hope of something fragile but untested. In that fragile dawn, both knew the choice was no longer about themselves. James sat beside Emma, his posture tense, his voice raw. I cannot undo leaving you, but I can choose not to leave her. Emma turned slowly, her eyes glistening. You think words erase years? She asked, bitterness laced with exhaustion. James shook his head. No, but actions might. For the first time, she saw not arrogance, but a man stripped of armor. She whispered, I don't know if I can ever trust you. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the infant's tiny breath. Emma stared at the child's face, her heart torn between fear and something dangerously close to hope. Emma rose from the bench, the baby still nestled in her arms. She whispered, This child saved me when I wanted to disappear. James stood quickly, his face filled with awe and regret. She saved me too, though I never deserved it, he admitted. Emma's voice cracked. Do not say that unless you mean to prove it. James nodded, a tear finally sliding down his cheek. The baby stirred and cooed, and both froze, the fragile sound cutting through their pain. Emma's heart swelled with something she could not name. Fear, love, maybe both. The morning light brightened, casting them in a glow that felt both merciful and cruel. The park emptied, leaving only Emma, James, and the child. Emma looked out across the field, her voice soft but steady. I promised to leave, but she made me stay. James' chest rose with a shaky breath, his eyes locked on Emma. Then stay, and let me stay with you, he pleaded. Emma's lips trembled, her silence louder than his desperation. She whispered, If you fail us again, there will be nothing left to save. Oh. Her warning cut through the air, heavy with truth. James nodded, accepting the weight of her words, his pride finally shattered into resolve. The baby's hand moved against Emma's collar, anchoring her to the moment. Emma turned toward James, her voice breaking into a whisper that felt final. I never wanted to be a mother, until she called me Mama. The words shattered the silence, echoing in James' chest like thunder. His breath caught, his eyes filled with tears, and Emma held the baby closer, her heart heavy yet resolute. The child stirred, its soft whimper carrying louder than any verdict or vow. James whispered, Then let me stand beside you. Emma's gaze lingered on him, her face unreadable, but her grip on the child tightened. The dawn rose higher, casting them all in blinding light, leaving only the sound of the infant's breathing.